Hello and welcome to the Pinstripe Post. My name is Ryan Sampson, but he is the star of the show, Joel Sherman. Today is Monday, July 22nd. The Yankees split the first series out of the All-Star break against the Tampa Bay Rays. They win today in 9-1 fashion. Juan Soto, multiple home runs today. But I got to start off by saying and welcoming Joel. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Busy day today. Television, had to write my online column, but I don't know what you're hitting me with. I know you've got a plan, so I'm going to follow you. I'll follow you to the center of the sun, Ryan Sampson. You just go, baby.
I'm honored that you even said that right then and there. But to be frank right with you, Joel, is that I am pumped up that you are willing to make yourself available to talk right after the series is end and fresh so we can actually get your first thoughts here. So I want to start with the first pitch, right? So the Yankees, they split this series against the Rays. They win the series against the Orioles heading into the All-Star break. And this is, for them, the Yankees have only won one series out of the last 9, Joel. And I think there's a couple quotes here I want to ask you about from Aaron Boone and Marcus Stroman specifically over this weekend. I don't know if you heard them. Boone says after he gets ejected, I think it was on Saturday, I think we're putting better at bats together. I think, the team's getting close. We're there. We're there. We just can't get that big hit. Stroman, after he struggles yesterday, says, it's been a rough patch. I mean, I wouldn't call it a rough patch. It's been over a quarter of the season that this team has just been below 500 playing baseball wise. He says we're close and we just got to get through it and trust in our process. Aaron Judge says similar things yesterday. Teams go through slumps. We just got to change what we have to do. If we're not getting the results we're getting, change our approach and we trust that we can win some ball games. So that's the ultimate question here, Joel, is that this team, this Yankee squad that you're watching after winning the series against the Orioles and splitting this one against the Rays, is this team closer to what they're saying? They're close. They're on their way, turning this thing around, or is that still on hold for this Yankee squad?
Yeah, I don't love the prediction game, as you know, so I don't really know the answer to it. I'll say this broadly. I don't trust Aaron Boone as a trustworthy narrator of the Yankee situation. If they were in the middle of a 40-game losing streak, he'd still find the silver lining in it. It's the way he does business. I respect it. He's not going to ever disenchant his clubhouse with negative talk, but whatever he says is irrelevant to certainly how I feel and probably reality in general. So it doesn't really matter. I do think for the opening innings of the game on Sunday that they lost, they had very good at bats and then 2 horrible outcomes in double play grounders hit by Wells and Soto, especially Soto. He's up 3-0 in the count. You've got to give him the green light if he wants it, even with Judge behind it. He's such a great hitter. And then they kind of like the air felt like it was taken out of them a little by not capitalizing, which again always leads me to the Yankees psychology if they're tough enough for stuff. Big picture, everything is big picture with them. They're built to win a championship. That's the standard they're held to. If I were looking for a silver lining today in the game where they split the series, it will, of course, be somewhat memorable that Juan Soto took over late and hit 2 homers. But that was icing on top. They were in control of the game. And John Heyman and I did our podcast earlier today with Ron Darling. And one of the things I said to John is the Yankees have to do things at the trade deadline. They got to get a reliever or 2. They've got to get another bat, probably one that plays third base if there's such an animal out there. But certainly they need one more bat. Having said that, I think they could do that. If some of the guys on this team do not play better, who are not named Soto, Judge, and Cole, they are not going to win at the level they want to win at. And so today, when Austin Wells continues to have good at-bats, which began late in the first half and carried over into the second half, and his responsibility has grown with Trevino out. I will say I'm not one of these try to never be a told you so guy, but I was on when Stanton
Absolutely.
is out and his at-bats are so good, when he's not catching, he should DH. Well, we're seeing he's catching every day now and the at-bats are good. I think he's one of those guys who has spent his whole life playing every day. And when he was doing 2 on, 2 off, 1 on, 1 off, that kind of thing, he couldn't get into a groove. I do think he's a pretty good hitter. And that's positive. Volpe's at-bats second half early have been much better. LeMahieu finally got a ball out of the ballpark today. Above all else, Carlos Rodon pitched very, very well. At its heart, the first 70 games of the season, the Yankees pretty much got a good start every game of the season, right? They had that amazing streak where for about 70 games, they got no fewer than 5 innings.
Right.
So they never overexposed their bullpen. And all 5 members of the group helped create a hole that was kind of Garrett Cole in total. It was like a 2.28 ERA for 5 guys. Can they get back to maybe not 2.8? How about 3.8 for the whole group? And consistently get 15 to 21 outs and not overexpose the bullpen. Ryan, they got to do things in the next 8 days. But the most important thing they've got to get is they've invested a lot in the guys on the current roster. And a percentage of those, especially prime age guys, Rodon, Gleyber Torres, Volpe, Wells, Verdugo, they have to play more consistent besides better. The inconsistency, the length of the slumps when they slump, these guys feels beyond the standard for a good players on a good team. And so the Yankees in some way have to trade for the players they believe they have for them to be good.
And that's ultimately where I guess I'm getting at here, Joel, is the signs and the at-bats that you mentioned today, specifically with Wells and Volpe in the second half to start already. You know, the stats are not good, Joel, when you look at the rest of this lineup, Sands, Judge, and Soto, right? I mean, the league-wide OPS is 709, and everyone else besides Judge and Soto is batting well below 700 in OPS. So that's an indictment on Cashman and company for where they built this roster. I think the question there is in the underlining is like, is this a matter of the Yankees are kind of just going to go into that mindset of we're going to trust Verdugo, we're going to trust Gleyber to somehow get out of this funk, and Verdugo to get out of this funk, and Volpe to play better? Is that ultimately what we're looking at from what we've seen in this first series in the second half? And do you feel like that's the way they're gearing this up towards? Is like, this is what we got.
I would have a question for you. What's the alternative?
Well, that's kind of where I would go with do up here is talking about the trade deadline. Do you go
but
aggressive?
Even at the trade deadline, you're not going to trade for 14 guys.
No,
right?
No.
Like the most likely outcome of the trade deadline is a bat, a reliever or two, and potentially like a swingman starter. Can it get better? I'll say this: if they traded for Vlad Guerrero Jr., they would still need other guys to play well. Right? Like, so they go from a 2-man lineup to a 3-man lineup, and that's not going to be enough. They need these other guys, even if they knock it out of the park in the next 8 days. It's very hard to win. This isn't basketball. You can't just say we're going to throw the ball to the same 2 or 3 guys every time, and that's how we're going to get to 104 points and win a game. Like, you need other guys to play well, to be good overall players. Verdugo has stopped being a good baseball player to the point where I think they've got to ask a question seriously if they should just play Grisham in center, Judge in left, and go forward like that, because at least they don't lose any defense that way. Grisham's at bats for the last 5 weeks have been better than Verdugo's for the last 5 weeks. So I would ask that question as much as anything else about, like, you're trying to just improve. But again, this is moving deck chairs around the Titanic. They've had Soto and Judge hitting 2-3. Think about how many manifestations of 1 and 4 we've had. Besides 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Right.
Right. And Ryan, I actually don't mean to make light of it in any ways. I'm actually thinking about this seriously. Like, I think it was last week's show. It could have been the week before show, where you were like, well, what happens when Rizzo comes back?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Ben Rice is now like 4 for 100 with 50 strikeouts. Like, in his, you know what I mean? It's like the world changes a lot. But Ben Rice isn't supposed to be on the team or someone they're leaning on right now. These other guys are.
Fair enough.
And if they're going to probably get Stanton back in the next week, I wonder if they ambush the Mets and he shows up tomorrow and plays, or in the next few days, because they've been very squirrely. I mean, very Yankee No, I mean very squirrely about how they handled like information about everything, but including this. So perhaps there's just going to be a moment where Stanton, who doesn't seem to want to go on a rehab, just wants to hit off the high speed machine, just wants to show up and play in the lineup. And we know he at least brings presence, if nothing else. I just want to add one other thing about why I mentioned Stanton there. The Yankees have not been a good total offense. Their work against left-handers in particular has been pathetic. And the Mets are starting Quintana and Minaya the next 2 days. And I don't think it's an accident how the Mets set things up. As we remember, they kind of got David Peterson in the last time instead of Severino. They kept Severino out of this one. And Severino's kind of been their best starter for the totality of the year. The Yankees have to do better against lefties. That means, besides Soto and Judge, who are just great against lefties also. So Stanton did okay, but not great against lefties. He needs to be closer to above average or better. Volpe has not hit lefties. He needs to hit lefties. And look, one of the good things about the lineup this year is they had some left-handed diversity. And they, but like, Verdugo hasn't hit lefties. Wells has been okay, but not great. Like they're susceptible in a way. And, I include this guy's name in my column tomorrow as just a name. I know the aggregator Fox will jump out on it, but just a name. Like Ahmad Rosario is a positional depth player, but he has one great skill. He can really hit lefty pitching. And he's a free agent on a team in sell mode. He'll probably move. He's actually the kind of guy, because he has a little athleticism and flexibility positionally, who could help them. If not him, someone like him. Because, again, like LeMahieu, he needs to have a 750 OPS against lefty pitching or better. It's pathetic. It's across the board, and they're just too susceptible. And the games, as you know, today, it's why I pointed out today was different. There's so many games, Ryan, when you're watching it, you go, oh, Judge and Soto are up. This is an inning they'll score or could score. Then they don't, and you go, I'll see you in an hour.
Yeah, I know.
When they come up again, because they have no shot, and they're easy outs. And that it's why I say they can't replace 7 position players. So some of these other people have to perform well. And to some degree, historically now, they're good with relief pitching. Well, you've seen some of these guys are performing much better for the Yankees than they did in other places. The Tompkins, the Hills, the Jake Cousins, etc. Why do the hitters not improve? They've gotten bullpen down, and I get it. Hitting is historically tougher than ever before. But this bad for this many guys, for this extent, when they go in the shitter, they really go in the shitter.
Right. And I think that's why I was asking ultimately to start off, the Stroman quote, the Boone quote. I know you're saying he'll paint lipstick on a pig, right? As Michael Kay likes to say, that's how Boone will always look at it. But for your eye, for what you're seeing, and I hope I'm reading this right, you're taking some silver lining in what Volpe has done so far in these first 4 games. Maybe they can somehow jumpstart Verdugo. I don't know. LeMahieu, do you take a positive, the fact that he hit a home run today after getting benched? How do you feel about those type of players that you mentioned here? Those are the guys that have to come out of these slumps and just be an average baseball player for this lineup.
Yeah, I take very little out of it because, again, I don't forget how long the season is, and I tend not to forget previous shows we've done. And I think if we went back to some of our first shows, early shows, one of the things we talked about a lot is the sense that the lineup was more diverse and longer. Right. Those early days when Volpe was hitting and suddenly it's all lead him off. And Verdugo was hitting well enough that they actually put him into cleanup. And there was good. Oswaldo Cabrera hit well for the first 3 weeks of the season. And so this isn't about temporary. But I'll go back to this. It is not ancient history. Gleyber Torres and DJ LeMahieu had 800 OPSs in the second half of last season. Not 1905, not 1995, 2023 in the second half. Now, is it possible in that 1 year period DJ LeMahieu completely got used up, and Gleyber Torres kind of mentally fell out because in his walk year. Well, probably that's what we've seen for about 65% of the season. But nothing feels impossible to me, especially about Gleyber, who's in the middle of his career, and I know is a better hitter than this. I know he's a better hitter. And so does it show up over the last 50 games? I think I said this last week. I'll say it again because I do think it has value. In the midst of the great Yankee run of the late 90s and early 2000s, Paul O'Neill once said to me, you know, when you win a championship, everyone on the team had a good year. And his point was, there'll be a guy who hit 204, but we'll remember the 2 games he helped win, or the key defensive player, the key base running, or when he filled in for an injured guy for a week so valuably. And so there is still that possibility. The Yankees are like in an interesting place. They're after this afternoon, I think they're a game and a half out of first place, and yet 4.5 games out of the playoffs. Like they could fall like an Aaron Judge injury or Garrett Cole injury, something like that, can really put them in peril. I expect them to make the playoffs in a 6 playoff team field in the American League, but they're not clear and loose right now. Therefore, DJ LeMahieu could have 2 good months and have a very meaningful impact on the 2024 season. Gleyber Torres can do it. Anthony Volpe can do it. We know who the heavy weightlifters are. They need a chorus to be better than to be better, and I think as important, Ryan, more consistent with shorter slump periods than we've seen to date.
I hear you, Joel, and I think Yankees fans are hoping to see it. The consistency is what we're asking for, and just average baseball play. Being an average baseball player, get to 700 OPS at least. Get there, be consistent, and get out of this funk that they've been in for over 2 months now. And it's the sample size is large enough there where you start to ask yourself, where the hell is this Yankees team and where are we going, right? Because this is the crunch time. This is the final stretch, right? Like this is the stretch run we're about to hit in August, and the trade deadline's here. So you're either going to make your adjustments and say this is the squad we're rolling with, or I don't know, Joel. And I think that's what we're going to get to here and do up. All right. So I want to talk about trade deadline needs. And you know, Tommy's throwing infielders at me. I could ask you about those. I could ask you about where you think is most important for this team to address. And I think a key question here that and I give Hogan credit for this one. Has the infield turned into a more critical need to address at the trade deadline than the bullpen has, to your point, where they've gotten some really good performances from the Hill, the Cousins, and the Michael Tonkins of the world?
So I think historically when the Yankees have a good team, and I think they have a good team, I think it's better than what we've seen over 30 games. You know, I would point out, like, you know, going into the second half, the Dodgers had been about a 500 team for about 50 games. And we think they're very good. The Braves are under 500 for the last 59 games. I looked at it today. They're 28 and 31. We think of that as a very good team. Like there are long stretches. I think the Yankees are very good, but that's not the standard they want to play to. They tell us every year they're playing for a championship. Not my words. They always get mad at the people who just repeat what. Well, you told me it's like championship or bust. That's the standard I'm holding you to. So they need to get better. In that realm, when Brian Cashman has had that kind of team, he has worked very hard at the deadline to add personnel to it, often in multiple buckets. Mm-hmm. And I suspect that he'll add in multiple buckets at least a bat. And like I think the under-over would be a bat and a reliever. And I would bet the over that a second reliever or a second bat or both show up, or a swingman starter to begin to maybe put Hill in the bullpen. Like if you found a swingman starter, and that way you kind of like work in both elements. I just think that's who he's been. He has as opposed to most executives, he has a very long track record. And I think there's another pressure point. They just can't expect Cole and Judge to have great years forever. A lot of that has now gone unfulfilled, at least championship wise, while they've had both of these guys who have won MVPs, Cy Youngs, and they have not fulfilled the greatest hopes of this. Hell, Cole won the Cy Young last year. They didn't make the playoffs. Okay? This is the only year for sure they know they have Juan Soto, who I think everyone who watches him now goes, this might be the best hitter I've ever seen. Right? He's going to be on your short list, especially for 25 and under. So they have these three giants of the game. They only know they have them at this level and in Soto underemployment this year. You can't play the I hope Spencer Jones is a good player someday game. Now, if you truly believe in your heart that Spencer Jones is on an Aaron Jones trajectory and you need to take him off the chessboard, fine. If you believe that about Jason Dominguez, fine. But at some point, you got to say one or two. And in this kind of season, everyone else is available for the right kind of player. Now, will that player become available? And who is that player? Like, if Vlad Guerrero Jr. is available, I'm not sure he's going to be. The Blue Jays say they want to try to win next year, which I think is delusional of that organization. He is a free agent after next year. But if they hold on, like if they decide to put him in the marketplace, first of all, I think whatever the Yankees should offer, the Mariners should offer more, right? Like whatever it is. Like the Mariners, there's 30 teams in the major leagues. 29 have played in the World Series, and then there's the Mariners, right? The Mariners have made the playoffs once since 2001. That is a team that needs to stop talking about like the future for sure and go for it. But like, what is your Vladimir Guerrero play? How much we just saw over the weekend? The Yankees really unplugged Isaac Paredes, who had been hitting great. Suddenly he's in a slump. Is he a guy you think is actually a well above average hitter as he's been the last 2 years? He's got a lot of control in front of him.
Yeah. And he's also position versatility on Paredes too.
And most importantly for them, third base.
Right. Exactly.
For this. Like, what are you willing to give up? I know people will say, well, it's in the division. Toronto and Tampa Bay and the Yankees made a trade just before the season, right? Ben Roethlisberger went to Tampa Bay, and the trade that brought John Birdie to New York. So I think it could be done. I think Brian Cashman has historically, since his control period, which starts about 2005, 2006, where he really gains a lot of control, has been very, very protective of his farm system. The farm system has never turned out in the major leagues to be as good as the protective level of the group. He has generally traded and not been hurt. Like, he now is feeling a little pain. If they had Josh Smith would be the starting third baseman. But every team, like, I see people now like killing Brian for that. And it's just like, understand, if you're at the top of the sport making trades and the worst you do in 25 years is Josh Smith, you've done a freaking unbelievable job, right? Like if at some point you're going to trade somebody where there's pain. But I think they have to really limit the number of prospects they say are off
limits.
Off limits.
Yeah.
I think pretty much everyone. And by the way, I think even Spencer Jones and Jason Dominguez I can't imagine who the player is unless you want Guerrero so bad. But like, if there is a tremendous difference-making player, is that Mason Miller? That's a very dangerous trade for me. Mason Miller averages 100 miles per hour. It feels like he could pitch 2 innings for you and then not pitch in 2 years after Tommy John surgery. As attractive as that might be. Is it Garrett Crochet, who probably could go in, again, like feels like go into your rotation now, dominate your bullpen?
It's Luis Hill 2.0. That's what that Garrett Crochet feels like, Yeah.
But like he's had a lot of injuries these last few years. So it's about a bat to me. If you could get a controllable bat, and if you believe in your heart that you're going to sign Juan Soto long-term, no matter what, an outfielder prospect, as good as the outfield prospect is, has to be available.
I don't see why not. I know I argue with Yankees fans, or in my case, talking to Tommy about it a lot. I told him I don't care about Spencer Jones. Jason Dominguez, I think, is legit, but like Spencer Jones, See you, dude. If we're truly all in on this Juan Soto year and we want to keep a Yankee full time, if you're Brian Cashman, Hal Steinbrenner, it shouldn't matter. Those prospects should not be on. Like there should be no prospect off the table in these trade scenarios. All right, so
But
three.
I will say this is in his time in the minor leagues, no one saw Aaron Judge as the kind of player he turned out to be. And therefore, there is a difference between trading Josh Smith and trading Aaron Judge.
Correct.
Now, there might be one Aaron Judge ever in the history of the game. Forget about just among Yankee prospects. But the Yankees drafted Spencer Jones as the athletic player who, very big, who they feel can close up some holes in his swing and play to his power and play the outfield at a high level. And, you know, I saw Spencer Jones at the Futures game. What a nice kid. Talked to him for a while. I mean, really nice kid. And you saw some of it. I saw a line drive. I saw a stolen base. I saw a sliding catch in just like 5 innings where you could sit and say, wow, like if we're just basing, that's an interesting kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he is a level ahead of Judge at the same age. And remember, Judge wasn't Judge in the minors. Like he was never a top 25 prospect. He was a prospect, but he wasn't like Jackson Holiday or Jackson Churio were this year, where people are like, can't miss, #1 prospect in the game. So you do have to trust your infrastructure. If the people you've hired, this is why you need competent people, are telling you, Brian, you cannot trade this guy because there's a 60% chance he's going to be a multi-time all-star, then you can't. But this is it. I go back to one of the reasons the Yankees were a dynasty when they were a dynasty was they did great in the minor leagues on the Brian Sabian and Bill Livesey. You know, just a lot of really talented players, especially that group that came at one time and was almost great from day one. You know, the core 4 guys.
Yeah.
But Stick Michael orchestrated it, and he had a savantism for knowing the difference between Russ Davis and a high-level major leaguer. And knowing, hey, the industry thinks Russ Davis is one thing, but I know he's not. I've gone and seen him. You know, in the Yankee organization, that's Tim Nearing, it's Matt Daly, it's some of their other scouts. They're not going to tell us publicly what they think of it. But if they're telling Brian Cashman, Brian, you could do anything between now and 6 p.m. July 30th, but you can't trade this guy, then you can't trade the guy, right? But if they're saying, hey, if there's still people in the industry who think this guy's a high-level all-star, we just think there's too many holes in the swing for a big guy, now's the moment to get as much as you can. But I guess my bigger point was you've got to, I know in previous trade deadlines where I talked to frustrated executives from other teams who tell me Brian Cashman's like taking 10 guys off the board. And it's just like, okay, that can't be this year when you have Soto, Judge, and Cole. Like you could take 2, but you can't take 5.
Yeah, just I guess me as
not
the
for
Yankees,
the right guy.
right?
If you're just doing David Robertson, Tanner Scott, and Ahmed Rosario, then you could protect a lot of guys.
Right.
And by the way, that might be the kind of haul that's worth several wins down the stretch and is good enough to get them in. And maybe what they do because they actually still believe in this current group. But yeah. Anyway, I just think that aggression has to be a big part of what they do in the next 8 days.
And that's what's so fascinating, right? Like you talk about the aggression and what prospects, you know, do you feel you value and say we can't trade this guy or we can trade this guy. It's that kind of that surrounding pressure and aura in the Yankees, right? Like Yankees fans are desperate for this team to finally make a World Series, let alone win one, right? And we know we have this just timeline of we only have one thing guaranteed, and that's Juan Soto in the playoffs, barring health, right? Like that is the only thing we have guaranteed with this team. And we have Cole in his prime and Judge in his prime. And that is your chance to take whatever you can. And let's be honest, an American League that I think is not as strong as we may think it is, because the Orioles are gettable. Unless they make massive improvements to that rotation, they are gettable. You know, the Astros are the Astros. I feel like they're going to be on there. The Mariners, this is their first time, it feels like, actually being in that competitive level. And the Guardians, I'm sorry, I'm always going to take the Yankees against an AL Central team in the playoffs. That's just how it is. So it just feels that immense pressure of them, to your point, got to get after it. You got to go take your chance and swing at it. So let me throw a couple names at you, Joe, real quick, just because I know Tommy wanted me to mention these guys. And you tell me whether this is realistic, not realistic, or you go like, Ryan, that's bullshit, or get the fuck out of here. Matt Chapman. Any truth to a possibility of the Yankees making a move for a guy like him?
I think it would be on the board. I'm not sure. I think the Giant executive baseball operations level is under a lot of pressure to try to get in this year. I don't think they're very good, but they're getting Robbie Ray and Alex Cobb back in the very short period here. And Snell started to pitch well, so you got Snell, Webb, Harrison, Cobb, Ray. That's a pretty good group where you could believe. I just think that no one is very good in that like massive, like 7 or 8 teams,
right.
And nobody's terrible. And you could always. We just saw the Astros make up 10 games in 24 days, and it always just feels like it's so touchy now because of the trade deadline. You win one, you lose one. What should you do? But in the National League wildcard, if you have a 15-5 20-game period, you're going to be singing, man. And the Giants could feel with that starting pitching, why couldn't we? Now, if they decide they don't, it's in play with the problematic situation that a player with a player option is a very difficult trade, because if the player doesn't play well, he's going to pick up an option you don't want him to pick up. Right? And it's not for nothing. His option's like 25-ish or something like that, if I'm remembering Chapman. So it could be a booby prize for next year also. If he plays well, you're going to leave it. And then the question becomes, how do you trade for that player? Like the Giants are going to be saying, we're giving you a very good player for maybe a year and a half. So, or it's just for 50 games. So I think it's a very difficult player to imagine being traded well, if traded at all.
Okay. And then I got a couple other. You mentioned Ahmad Rosario. How realistic is that one? Luis Renifo. And also, I'll throw in Isaac Paredes and Vlad Guerrero. Those guys are infielders that you hear names in the trade deadline market. If you were to take the 3 that you think are actually realistic there of those names, we also mentioned Chapman there. I mean, who are the 3 you would say, actually, you know what? I could see that guy getting moved.
Well, Rosario's a free agent at the end of the year, so I'd be very surprised if he wasn't traded in the next 8 days. I think Tampa Bay is about as open a seller as there is now. They might do some buying also. They haven't completely given up, but they're going to certainly sell somebody who's a free agent to be like him. I strongly suspect Randy Arozarena will be on a different team come, again, Seattle, pick your team, the Dodgers, somebody before July 31st. I think they're going to trade another starting pitcher. They've got
Jeffrey Springs coming.
A Yankee person said this to me the other day. I was there on Sunday after Taj Bradley pitched on Saturday, and the guy said, "Did you see that guy's stuff? Can you imagine what him and Shane McClanahan are going to look like together?" But they don't get McClanahan till next year.
Right.
But they're getting Jeffrey Springs and Rasmussen back shortly, so they have like the guy who pitched today, Zach Littell or Zach Eflin. Like those are guys that can move in the next week. I think they'll be open on a release. I think they're very open, but for somebody like Paredes or Yandy Diaz who have control and don't cost a ton moving forward, I think you're going to have to spend in a market where, to your point, and it's the correct point, Ryan, nobody hits well in the sport right now. You're going to have to spend $1.25 for $1 to get a hitter with control. You might have to spend $1.35. Like it's going to cost you a lot to get a hitter with control. I think emotionally, the Blue Jays don't want to trade Guerrero. I think they should. But if you just said, I have to bet, I would say they don't have the stones to do the right thing. But they should do it. And when somebody, I know, he had said he'd never play with the Yankees. And then recently, he'd said, softened and said it's a business. Me, I always say, oh, that's bullshit. Marcus Stroman and Brian Cashman hated each other till the moment they needed each other, right? Like the Yankees hate the 2017 Astros more than evil itself. And J.D. Davis became the 3rd 2017 Astro to play for the Yankees. So, I hate to say it like this, but fuck all that bullshit. It's business. People will go where they need to go. So I think it's going to be very hard to find bats. there's still so many National League teams that are kind of like the Nationals traded Hunter Harvey, then just had a great weekend. They get they have the same record as the Reds. How do the Reds decide? I don't think the Reds would do this. I'm going to throw out the name that I don't think, but if they put Spencer Steer into the marketplace, I think they'd get $1.35 for it, because I think he's actually a good hitter with a lot of control years. And the question, but they want to start winning next year if they're not going to win this year. So I think it's a tricky marketplace. I think a lot of buyers, not a lot of sellers, and yet the Yankees got to get some stuff done. And that's why I think you can name all the guys, and I think ultimately look at the relief market.
Okay.
If you're a Yankee fan, hope against hope that somehow the Chicago White Sox play like an actual major league team for 3 days and kick the crap out of the Rangers, which would not only get David Robertson, Jose Leclerc, and Kirby Yates into the market, but by doing it would put more supply in the market and therefore potentially lower the prices in other places. And if you watch the Mets the last few days, I mean, Tanner Scott's got good shit. That is good stuff. Now, I worry about him. He's not had a lot of experience in big games. He could get wild, but when the stuff is near the plate, pretty difficult to hit.
Hogan loves Tanner Scott. I know he's mentioned him a lot. He's a big proponent of trading for Tanner Scott, so we'll see what happens with that guy. Joel, let's move over to Radio Irrational. There's a thing that happened this weekend. I know you probably saw it today, too. Jose Siri hits a home run, slow-ass trot around the bases. Juan Soto hits a monster home run, slow-ass trot around the bases. They cut to Aaron Judge. He gives a little stare down. I to be honest with you, Joel, I don't think it matters. I think it's more a sense of, and I think Aaron Boone even alludes to this, listen, we got to stop them from hitting the ball out of the fucking ballpark if we really are going to take notice of them going slow around the bases. I think that's just whatever. Jose Siri, whatever. The problem I do have, though, and this is my Radio Irrational take here, was Nestor Cortes. I don't know if you saw his tweet this week over the All-Star break, Joel. He tweeted out and goes, this is what's funny. Everyone wants to talk down on the Yankees, but they want to be us. Every year we are in contention. I'm blessed to be able to compete for a playoff spot and always be contenders at the end. Except for the fact Nestor Cortes has been god-awful in his last 2 starts, in between this tweet that he had sent out and in the midst of this Yankees team that has only won 1 effing series out of the last 9. I got a problem with that, Joel. I mean, I know, listen, I like fire. I like passion. I like that when players are like, yeah, I'm all for the squad. I'm all for winning and all that. But if you're going to tweet that, prove it on the field. Show it and shove it down the throats of the other team that you're playing and pitch to the way you're supposed to be able to pitch. I got an issue with that. I don't know about you felt about that tweet. I mean, maybe it's nothing for you and you're like, it's one of those things that you find is bullshit. But I wanted to hear what you wanted to say about Nestor Cortes.
Almost across the board, I find all of this bullshit. So today, Jose Siri took about 35 seconds to get around the bases. You know who should have had a big problem with that? The Tampa Bay Rays. They were losing 4-0, and the game was made 4-1. This is the guy celebrating a touchdown like a nutcase when his team is down 35-7. What do you? Again, none of this. None of it bothers me because who cares ultimately? But do you have no feel whatsoever? Again, if it's the Yankees, I'd almost laugh. I'd point at the scoreboard and go, it's 4-1, asshole. And by the way, you're sellers at the trade deadline, and we're trying to make the play. All that kind of stuff. It's just this look at me stuff without any context or sense of appropriateness with it. So that's what I would be madder if I were a Ray today than if I were a Yankee on that. As far as what Nestor Cortes did, I just think it's stupid to do it. And that's, by the way, if he was pitching to a 1.50 ERA and the Yankees were on a big winning streak, what's the value of it? Is this it's clearly not going to psych up your team. It's all ephemeral. It's just spontaneous sugar high nonsense. Who cares? I will say that I know you're pointing out to these last 2 starts by Nestor Cortes. I think Nestor Cortes can handle, we talk a lot here about handling big games in New York. Nestor Cortes might fail. That guy is not afraid. Whatever he's got, you're going to get. he got yesterday. Like, gave up a lot of home runs. He finally didn't pitch well at home, where he had pitched great all year. But that guy, I just think so much of baseball, because there's such an inventory of games, Ryan, comes down to, like, who are you comfortable taking the biggest at bats, throwing the biggest pitches? If you told me the Yankees had a do-or-die game in the playoffs and Nestor Cortes was starting, I would say fine. Like, he might blow up, but I know he's not going to blow up because he's scared. He's psyched out by the moment. So, like, I think Nestor Cortes can handle this. And so 2 bad games, who cares? And ultimately, that other stuff, that's just a generation or 2 before me of people who do shit like this on both things. The way that they're running the bases and deciding you have to say something on social media. I would say to guys, do what you want. It's a free country. You're really not bothering me. I just wonder, is it the smartest thing to do? Like, what is appropriate in the moment?
Yeah, I hear you, Joel. I'm not saying Nestor's afraid of the moment. I never questioned, like, his fear or anything like that. But for me, why in that moment you had to feel the sense to
why
tweet
in
that
any
out?
moment, Ryan? Like, would you have felt better if he did that and he had a 150? Or I just think I don't think it's the smart. Like
it's not smart, because your team has been struggling now for 2 months.
Empty calories to me. If you have a big winning streak or a big losing streak, it's valueless.
Right.
Like, all you could do is get people like us talking about it. And I don't, with by the way, no tangible benefit to your ball club. And that's, by the way, if they're in a 10-game winning streak or a 10-game losing streak. So I always want, but by the way, if that's real, I don't want players to be PR spin. Right. If, like, you feel like that's what you've got to do it. I would say, if I were his teammate, if I were his manager, his general manager, his pitching coach, I would just say, tell me the upside of it. Like, that is a success if what happens. I don't see the value of it. 10-game winning streak, 10-game losing streak. So I would say, if I were, as a reporter, do what you feel is real. I deal with vanilla spun bullshit all the time. So I want you to do what you want to do. If I was his teammate, I would try to reverse engineer it and say, if this went spectacularly well, what would that look like? It would look like nothing. There is no spectacularly well for this. Like, it isn't like people are going to sit there and go, oh, Nestor Cortes is right. Everyone wants to be a Yankee.
I got you, Joel.
It's going to psych up the Yankee. I just think it's empty calories.
Yeah.
Like most bullshit on social media. It's all empty calories. I wish fucking people would stop. We live in a better country and world, but it's not going to stop.
No.
And so we all have to adjust to it. And that's the old man on the lawn is adjusting to it by saying, I don't really care. But if I was his teammate, like I was Jose Siri's teammate, I would say, and I was a veteran who could maybe talk to him, I'd say, tell me the benefit of this. Tell me how it worked out great.
Yeah.
Even to Jose Siri. We're down 4-0, man. Tell me the benefit of this. I know what the downside is. If the Yankees react old style, they're about to put one in your ear next time. So I know there's no benefit because that's just not great. You risk injury, then you risk a war on the field. Like, there is no psych them up, right? Like, you fucking guys got blown out today, so you certainly didn't psych up your team. So I don't get it. But it's not done for somebody in my demographic. But if I were his teammate, I'd say, I don't give a fuck what demographic I'm in. This is stupid fucking shit.
Well, speaking of what demographic it might be, I think it's for me and Hogan. So I'm going to bring in Tommy Hogan for Hoganalytics. And before we get to you, Tommy, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Joel this as well. And I kind of got to bring it up because we got the Subway Series Part 2 coming up this week. What'd you think of Luis Severino's comments about, and mind you, he was right, but the Yankees lineups, 2 hitters. Everything else, it ain't much.
Well, I hope he stops doing it. He'll have a better podcast than us. He was right.
All right, go ahead, Tommy.
I'm always with play, but Luis Severino is one of the most. Luis Severino is as honest a Yankee as has existed in what I would call the let's kill fucking truth era of their time. Him and Jorge Posada would win the freaking contest.
Interesting. Well, I've got some stats to back up Luis Severino's comments about what you guys were talking about earlier, the complementary players just not being there for Judge and Soto. Now, these stats are before today's game, but in the 9-for-20 stretch, the Yankees had 3 players in the bottom 5 of the entire league in WRC+. Verdugo, LeMahieu, and Volpe. Now, those numbers may have all gone up today because DJ homers, Volpe homers, Verdugo has a base hit, breaks his 0-for-20 slump. To find 3 players on the same team in that bottom portion of WRC+, I had to go 32 players deep, and it's the Seattle Mariners who had 3 in the bottom 32, and they just released one of those guys in Ty France. So that's a little interesting.
Kind of why I said they need Vlad Guerrero worse than the Yankees.
Sure, exactly. But it got me thinking because I want to throw Gleyber Torres into those 3 other players because it's the 4 guys on this team that just haven't come close to their expectations this season. So I tried to find a common denominator of those 4 guys.
I'm going to tell you what the common denominator is.
What is it, Joel?
They cannot get the ball in the air, those guys. Those guys are ground ball fucking machines.
They are, no question. Verdugo, I actually texted this stat to Ryan 3 weeks ago, and I saw a beat writer tweet it, I think it was yesterday. He leads all of baseball in ground balls to second base. It feels like every single at bat is a ground ball to second base.
And not only are they ground balls, but I know you guys watch the games also. These are not hard hit ground balls where you're like, that guy was positioned well or made a great play. Those guys lead the league in the 4-hop routine ground ball. Like Volpe and LeMahieu in particular, like they can't. Again, if I was looking for something encouraging to open the second half, Volpe has gotten the ball in the air.
Line drives again, like we saw in the first month or so of the season. Like he had the homer today, but he's also starting to hit the line drives up the middle into the opposite field, which is what we were asking from him all off season. Now I'll be honest.
It's a delicate balance, right? Because like in previous years, we'd say they were too homer reliant.
Right.
Sure.
And now it's kind of like, I think they, as a team in general, have a lower strikeout percentage than in recent years, but there's a lot of weak outs. And so where's that happy medium between, to me, the exit velocity issue is it. Like these aren't, like Aaron Judge hits ground balls, they get through it. Like Juan Soto hits ground balls, Giancarlo Stanton, they hit ground balls. And again, these are the monsters of the sport. But LeMahieu used to hit the ball hard.
Right.
Like that was one of his secrets is like people are like, wow, DJ LeMahieu. I'm like, do you watch DJ LeMahieu? The ball really comes off his bat and the numbers would back it up. And now they're not. And so every ground ball is just 5-3.
Or a double play, especially like Verdugo hitting cleanup behind Judge and Soto, who are always on base. Those ground balls were turning into 2 outs. I'll be honest, though, that was not the common denominator that I came up with.
I would have lost this game show.
Okay, well, this was more of my dumb Yankee fan brain here that came up with this common denominator.
They all have vowels in their last name.
Not that
all
dumb.
have vowels in
Not that dumb. Promise it's not that dumb. Those are the 4 guys that we were debating before the season started who should hit leadoff. Volpe, Torres, Verdugo, DJ LeMahieu before he got hurt. Those were the 4 guys we said which one of those 4 are going to hit in front of Judge and Soto.
And then I was saying earlier what a musical chair has been for 1 and 4, right? Because none of them have answered the question. And I almost wonder now, Tommy, if he should put Gleyber at 1, be somewhat assured that with Soto and Judge behind him, like to me, Gleyber is the guy. I know, look, I'm probably wrong about it. I know he's a good hitter. I know he's in the prime of his career. And I would just say for the next 100 plate appearances, since everything sucks as it is, and Ben Rice is kind of like they've all figured out the kryptonite with him, I'm going to put the righty hitter in front of the lefty Soto, a guy with a track record. I'm not stealing bases anyway from up there, right? And so I think what I would do is just put Gleyber there and say, I believe in you, dude. Now, I know that might not have the power of a Nestor Cortes tweet, but that's what I would do as a statement to Gleyber. There's 50 games left, man. I know you think this season has created something for free agency or whatever. You got 50 games and maybe 15 to 20 more in the postseason. I'm putting you in the leadoff spot. It's the greatest place to bat in the sport. You're hitting in front of Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. They're arguably, with Soto, the two of the three best hitters in the whole sport, right? That's where I'm putting you. You're going to get strikes. Go play great the rest of this year. It's still money out there for you, man.
And we know Gleyber's
that's what I would do. I've been thinking about it for a while. You know, I would hit Wells in a more prominent spot.
Right.
The other one, and he's finally moved up to cleanup. The one guy with a track record who's still in his prime is Gleyber. And it just might be he's going to have a 620 OPS this year. It's not going to be good. But I remember that second half last year. Freaking ball came off his bat.
But we know. I'm
going to show a lot of confidence in the guy and see what happens.
And we know he's a guy that kind of needs that sort of thing. He gets in his own head, and we've kind of chalked up this bad season to, well, this is probably his last year as a Yankee. That could be getting in his head. So maybe once he gets past the trade deadline, we saw a few years ago when he was on the trade market right after that, and he didn't get traded. He was like, he had a bad August because he was like, oh my God, I just almost got traded. So maybe now that he clears the trade deadline, he can be like, okay, I am a Yankee for the next 2 months. Let's go. And maybe that works.
Maybe the Yankees should do the dual thing, Tommy. If they know for sure he's not getting traded in the next 8 days, they should say, not only you're not getting traded, but you're our leadoff man.
Sure, maybe.
See, I know it's not Jose Siri trotting around the bases for encouragement, but I just think he's your best chance for an 800 OPS over the last 50 games, not named Soto and Joe.
I would agree that I tend to lean that the leadoff hitter, I don't know if is on the team right now. Like Ahmed Rosario, if they trade for him, which just sounds like a legitimate possibility, he was asked post game like yesterday, like that's a guy that could hit leadoff. Hits well against
he was asked because I suggested to Dan Martin that he go.
There we go. That's our guy.
We love Dan.
That's our guy.
Don't tell anybody.
Nope, we won't. We won't tell him.
Even though I told Dan, play it low, because in my column that's coming out on Tuesday morning, I'm going to mention some stuff about Ahmed Rosario. So don't tell anybody. Let's keep this.
But another guy,
I would like. There's probably a half dozen teams, again, including Seattle, the Dodgers, that could use at the bottom of their lineup or the top of their lineup some more heft. And this is a guy who can hit lefty. So like, there's just not. Everyone recognizes the Yankees' level of desperation. A team in their division who does spring training in their city, like the Yankees do spring training in their city, they're not going to make it easy for them to get even a walk-year player. They're going to squeeze the Yankees to get a lot or send them someplace else. So, like, I just wouldn't assume anybody. There's a lot of contenders who need everyone needs bats and everyone needs bullpen. The Yankees need a bat or two, and they need a bullpen arm or two. It's not going to be an easy road to it. And yet I suspect that Brian Cashman will pull down at least one of each, if not two of each.
Can I float another guy that I think I know how you're going to feel about it, but I think could solve the leadoff role? What about Jazz Chisholm?
No shot in the world.
What? He would lead. He would lead the team.
Not for free. Not for free.
He's a left-handed hitter. He gives him some power.
I'm aware. I watch baseball. I know he's a left-handed hitter.
Well, no, I'm listing the reasons why I think he does make some sense.
You can play on your team
as a Yankee target. Say that again.
You can play on your team. I would say this is I would work hard to get Vlad Guerrero Jr. That would be my guy.
I get that he's the bat that would make it a 3-person lineup. He would be the best bat out there, but he doesn't. Like, they still have issues at third and second base, whether they get Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Got it. I got it. If they got Jazz Chisholm, they'd still have issues at third and second base.
Okay. Fair enough. That's what I was asking. Fair enough.
Tommy.
Which means they'll probably get him.
Oh,
you know,
come on.
Pretty much every guy I said I wouldn't get in the offseason. Verdugo, Stroman, Grisham. 2 years ago, Rodon. Like, the Yankees certainly don't have the same taste I do. So
we know it's a team that they're going to be talking to because we know.
So assume I would never trade for Jazz Chisholm or Michael Kopech. So I'm assuming that Jazz Chisholm and Michael Kopech will be Yankees.
Mark it down.
You know,
Real quick with Tommy here, Joel, and I wanted to ask this to you too. Did the John Birdie setback hurt this a little bit and put more of an impact in what the Yankees might be doing here at the deadline? Or is this like, John Birdie's a bench player. He's a nice piece that we have that we're hoping to get back here sometime.
Well, in theory, John Birdie. So remember, the Yankees finished second for Ahmad Rosario in the offseason.
Right.
He went to Tampa Bay instead of the Yankees. And what they did is acquire John Birdie. In a trade, they tried to get Enrique Hernandez, then they tried to get Ahmad Rosario. They didn't get either, and then they traded for Birdie. So in theory, if Birdie came back and showed for 10 days, he's our speed against lefties, can play third base, move around the field a little, it might have taken – I still would have gone and gotten another guy who could hit lefties like Rosario and move around a little and have some depth to do it, and maybe put Oswaldo Cabrera in the minor leagues as just some depth there, or use Oswaldo Cabrera in a trade who still has like teams kind of like him, out there. Yeah, I obviously, but this is, I'll add this. It's kind of a non sequitur, except for it exists within this world, is everyone has injuries. And I've heard a lot of this bemoaning of like, well, what a shame. Like Jason Dominguez isn't healthy now, whatever. Right. But the general manager of the Yankees said quite prominently in the offseason that Giancarlo Stanton was going to get hurt. You know what the miracle was? That he didn't get hurt while Jason Dominguez was rehabbing from his Tommy John, right? Like if he got hurt in May, Jason Dominguez couldn't play, or April or whatever. So it's like the idea that Jason Dominguez isn't playing now for Giancarlo Stanton is like, okay, like everybody's got injuries, freaking figure it out. And by the way, Jason Dominguez played 7 games in the major leagues. He looked for 7 games, a lot like Ben Rice looked for 7 games. Like, can I see a season before we actually have to clear room in Monument Park for somebody?
If I can make a comment about John Birdie real quick, when I saw that he had a setback, in respect to John Birdie and his family, I whispered blessing in disguise. I was a little worried that the Yankees were going to be like depending on him to be the
Yankees
third.
So they have to get at least one.
Okay, thank God.
I don't think they see John Birdie as a back. I think they see John Birdie as a complimentary help.
Okay, I hope so.
And whatever gets Jahmai Jones off this fucking roster. All right, thank you,
Jahmai
Tommy.
Jones actually is in very few at bats has the 3rd best OPS versus lefties.
Yeah, pretty good as a starter
but
too.
I'll say this on my bingo.
The man can't lay down a bunt though when you need him though. So let's be real here.
Yeah, I mean
nobody
Jahmai Jones on my bingo card. I didn't have him still on the team on July 22nd.
Thanks, Tommy. All right, Joel. I was asked to remind you of this. Jose Canseco for Joel's notebook. I want to hear what this is about. What do you got, man?
So you asked me for Joel's notebook, see if I come up with a trade something. It's not trade deadline, but my first year on the beat was 89. Between 89 and 90, a story came out in the Daily News that the Yankees were talking seriously to the A's about acquiring Jose Canseco for Roberto Kelly and 2 pitchers named Bobby Munoz and Mark Hutton, who were like decent pitching prospects back then. And it was just before the winter meetings, so we're at the winter meetings. And Sandy Alderson is the general manager of the Oakland A's. And a small group of us see Sandy, including me and John Heyman, who works for Newsday at that point. And we run down Sandy Alderson and we ask him about the report. And he said, remind me. Sandy, very funny. He said, who's in the report? And we said, it's Jose Canseco for Roberto Kelly, Bobby Munoz, and Mark Hutton. He goes, gentlemen, those players can't rent Jose Canseco for a week. Which was a good moment to say that the Daily News story was inaccurate. But it was about as good a denial of a trade line as I've ever heard. Gentlemen, those players do not rent Jose Canseco for a week.
I'm always fascinated, Joel, when you're in these moments, right? Like, is there ever like, are you close to the GM? Like, I know you always wait for after the post trade deadline, like that presser, right? Like to pester the GM, like what moves you did make, what moves you didn't make. Is there the moments like you're waiting as you're seeing the rumors, and I know you're active on your phone, you're talking to people. There's like anything you could tell us or maybe not tell us or hint at, like, holy shit, if this move went through, like I would have been like floored if there was anything like that happen in your time covering baseball?
Well, a few things. Number one, I'd be very careful about the words I use, as I always am. I don't think I pester anybody. I ask pertinent questions that the people we're supposed to hold power to accountability, and I think that that's what I do. It's not pestering.
I'm sorry, I take that back. You know
No,
what, Joel?
no, I understand.
I respect the hell out of you because I know you hold a lot of people accountable, which is why a lot of Yankees fans love reading what you write, and that's the truth. To
And
be
the
honest,
second thing is, and hopefully it's one of the reasons why people talk to me, is the world we live in. You know, people tell me things all the time in confidence that I can't write, and that includes ever. And that's probably a longer list of than what I can write. And you know, the constant battle is to get what's interesting on the record and into print, which is an art. And you work with people and say, like, hey, I think there's a really interesting story. I think the fans would be fascinated by this. How can I navigate this? But there's been ones where people have told me stuff, Ryan, and didn't tell me I couldn't write it. And I've told the person, literally, you're the only person who could have told me this. The breadcrumbs will lead back to you and you'll end up getting fired. So I'm not going to report this. So, because I want to, like, there's no one story, unless it's like a nuclear bomb is about to hit us or something. There's no singular story that's worth ruining a relationship that might develop into 50 stories.
right?
And that the trust that's built, and it's why access is so important, where people get to know if you're a real human being or not. Do you have morals? Do you have a sense of humor? Can you be trusted? All this stuff. You know, this is the kind of stuff you're trying to show people, that you could trust me with information, that I know how to use the information. My first responsibility is to the reader or the listener, the viewer. But that is, I'm not just going to do my job today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so again, it's one of the things I don't like about the social media is everything is treated as a singular event. Like, why didn't you write this? Well, I've written several million words in my time. You know, we have a 750 word hole here. I can't write the history of the universe in the 750. You do the best that you can in it. And you're treating this like the only thing I've ever reported on something. You know, it's always oh, you didn't kill Brian Cashman. And I'm like, well, here's the 40 columns where I killed Brian Cashman. It's like, there is no never.
Right.
Like, I've done this for a long time, and I think you know me well enough. I just don't give a fuck.
No.
Like, to the extent of, I have enough friends. I'm not trying to make friends. I'm trying to write the best column I can, full of information and entertainment and insight and all that. And that all can't be accomplished in one column. You know, the good thing, I'm going to get to write another one tomorrow and the day after, and until the day they tap me on the shoulder and go, you're kind of senile now. You need to drop out of the race, so to speak. But, you know, like, until that happens, yeah, you know, it's you see my frustration with things like aggregators or the you know, the singular statement stuff on social media that has so much weight today. And it's like reading the first chapter of a book and saying, well, let me tell you everything about this book. And, well, you haven't read all the chapters. And so I get it. I have to adapt to this world. I have to adapt. Like, the world isn't going to change for me, and I don't want to be a dinosaur. So I'm on a webcast with somebody much younger than me who has a different worldview.
Yes.
Do a podcast with John, you know, like it's a different thing. I do television. I write a column in a completely different way than I wrote it 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. You have to adapt, but I want to have certain standards about it. And the most important standard to a degree is I'd like to believe I'm a trustworthy moral person. And I think it's very hard for people to share information with you if they don't think you're a trustworthy moral person. And like, if you like what I do, because suddenly go, oh, that's interesting. There's a lot of information there. Like, there's a lot of information there because over time, people have come to trust that they can share the information with me and I'll understand it and produce it in a way that doesn't cost people their jobs, but does meet my number one goal, which is my job is to the reader, viewer, listener. Like, that's who I'm at the honor of working for, ultimately. And that's never a single tweet. Like, can I destroy somebody in a single tweet? Sure, it's ephemeral. Nobody will remember in 48 hours, but it will have cost me a relationship. Maybe it will cost me my job. Kind of seems like a shitty way to go about it to me.
I think you bring up a fascinating point, Joel, and that's kind of where I was going towards a little bit, and I'm happy you went there. Is with respect to what you do and what you work for, and what you've been telling these stories and these columns that you've been writing, and the everything that you do around this sport is what we consume. And in that minute, like you say, a lot of media consumption now is all about that single tweet or that single video or that one thing that you're just wanted to get that information from, and then you process it and you're like, well, you didn't read everything else. You didn't get the full picture of everything else. And I think what you do so well is that you're willing to adapt and you're willing to do these things with us. And I'm appreciative of that.
You're very kind, but and again, I admit how much what the aggregators do bother me, because they will, on NewJersey.com and all the other scumbag places, they'll be like, MLB Insider says Yankees are close on Rosario. And of course, I didn't say that on this show. Or Yankees are getting Vlad Guerrero. And I didn't say that. And
nope.
Like, by proxy, I could lose credibility, and it has nothing to do with me. And it's like, maybe I should if I lose credibility, can it at least be about me, as opposed to some dishonest third party purposely, for the purposes of clicks, misrepresenting what I write or say. It feels like not a great part of our ecosystem. Like, I don't think it's really, like, I get it, you get a click, but again, our job is to inform readers. And we all, man, I failed a lot over the years. Like, I got a story, man, I thought he meant this or whatever, but like, you're trying your best. Like, the beautiful thing about this job is if it went perfect, you get to tell people the truth. What a great job. Like, I love that about this job. Like, that's what you're doing. You get to inform people with real information and the truth. And we have this kind of whole now infrastructure that fucks with the truth.
It does.
On purpose. And I just think it's not nourishing. I understand the endorphins go off when you see headlines. Who are the Yankees getting? You'll never believe it. And then you hit it, and it's not the truth. It's a purposeful overselling and misrepresentation of something that somebody else worked very hard during a long career to gather the information to actually put in context. Like, the context is the Yankees could really use somebody who hits lefty pitching well. They did have contact with Ahmad Rosario in the offseason. He would be someone who could fill what they want at a time where we know the Rays are sellers. There's a lot of actual things that I know because I've reported it over time there. The Rays are sellers. How close I think I was the one who first broke that the Yankees were close on Rosario back in the spring. Like things like that. And then in a couple of keystrokes, MLB Insider could be purposely misinterpreted. And it's like, well, aside from your click, like, who was that good for? Certainly not the people we're supposed to be working for, which is people who are nice enough to spend money to read us or come to this site and watch it. Like, people are using their time and energy, and we owe them something. And I think that other thing destroys our credibility. And, you're always working to keep your credibility. So anyway, I kind of went off on a ridiculous tangent here about this, but there's not a lot of forums for me to talk about how frustrating it is.
But that's what Joel's Notebook is for, though. That's what I want to open it up for you to have these. And
I could lie and act like it doesn't bother me. But as you see, a lot of internet stuff doesn't bother me because I know but I know that this specific thing is actually correctable if we wanted to correct it.
Joel, we appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. We're looking forward to seeing how this next week goes with the Yankees and how they approach this trade deadline. I know we're going to be talking to you next week. We'll figure that out. But as always, man,
next Monday will be a day before the deadline. So our question is, should we wait till like Tuesday night or Wednesday morning? We'll have to figure it out.
We'll figure it out. I have faith that we can do this. And
well, we did this on the spur of the moment.
Exactly.
Right
and that's what I appreciate you the most, is that you're giving us that time. Joel, thank you so much, man. I know you got a super busy week this next week. As always, thank you, man.
All the best.